not interested in what you see in the financing tool. I'm not interested in. My partner, who's a managing director of Wells Fargo Securities. Darren, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing with your institution?
Sure. So I'm
interested in what you see in the CMBS world,
except with the express written permission of Major League Baseball and the individuals on the panel. First to my left is Darren Esser, who's a managing director of Wells Fargo Securities. Darren, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing with your institution?
Sure. So I run our commercial real estate CLO business. We've been fortunate.
Talking to the mic.
We've been fortunate to be a leader in the space since, well, I guess in the last 22 months, we've done 11 transactions, static and managed vehicles. We look to structure transactions that are certainly transparent and investor friendly, that offer good relative value for the investor universe while providing attractive financing, reliable financing for commercial mortgage originators and issuers.
I think next Darren is Gene Kilgore, Executive Vice President at Arbor Commercial Mortgage.
I run our securitization platform, our capital markets platform at Arbor, and we have a public company and a private company. Public company is a bridge lender, and most of our borrowing through that entity is via CRE CLOs. We've done a total of 8 since 2004. And in our private company, we do, among other things, we have an agency multifamily business, predominantly Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
My partner, Jeff Rothblatt. You don't know who it is anymore? Jeff, I think it's okay. You can read it down.
I work here in the capital markets department, and together with Stu, do a lot of work on commercial real estate CLOs. We also do a lot of CMBS. In the CLO space, we represent issuers and underwriters, and we've been very active. And we were very active in what people refer to as the CLO 1.0 market, and we've been very active in the 2.0 market, trying to work with issuers and underwriters and bringing the product back to market and making sure that they are successful product.
Next to Jeff is Chuck Lee from Director Credit Suisse Securities.
Hi, yes, my name is Chuck Lee. We are around 2 years into the restart of the commercial real estate platform at Credit Suisse. I oversee the securitization operation, which includes principal and agented transactions, as well as our warehouse financing platform. This sector is one that is on sort of our next to-do list in terms of priorities. We have brought a handful of issuers out to market over the past couple of years, continue to remain involved not in this sector, in our primary sectors of principal origination and securitization, but third-party business with NPL issuers that still actually come to market from time to time, the agency guys, et cetera.
Next to Chuck is Joan Sappensley from Resource Real Estate. Joan?
Thank you. Resource Real Estate is a public mortgage REIT, Resource Capital Corp. We originate our loans directly, and we service them all ourselves. We don't outsource anything. We are externally managed by Resource America, which is a $20 billion asset manager. We have a dedicated team of 15 people that only originate transitional bridge loans for the REIT. We have done 6 CRE. First, we did 2 legacy CDOs, and now we've done 4 CRE CLOs. Since 2013, we have done about $1.3 billion in 4 deals of this iteration of CRE.
Thanks, Joan. And then finally, we have Kunal Singh, Managing Director from JP Morgan Securities.
Thanks, Stu. So,
you want to talk into the mic, Kunal?
Kunal Singh, I oversee the securitization and execution efforts at JP Morgan for all CMBS, both principal business and agented business, which includes CRE CLOs, where we've been quite active over the past 12 months in particular, but really since the market reopened back in 2010. We've been a leader in cutting-edge type of executions for different types of performing, non-performing, and then we have a active and growing financing business that sometimes results in CLOs, but a lot of the stuff we provide is bespoke solutions to clients who have varying types of needs with cash flowing and non-cash flowing assets.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you being on the panel. I'm Stu Goldstein, your humble moderator. The topic is really dealing with broader than just CRE CLOs, but other securitization and finance alternatives for bridge loans. I thought it'd be worthwhile to ask Jeff in 5 minutes or less, so that we don't lose the audience, to talk about really what the structure of a CRE CLO looks like, so we know what the difference is between that and a traditional CMBS deal. I'm going to try and press this button.
Sure. Very generally, when we talk about a frequent question that I get is, what's the difference between a CMBS and a CLO? Essentially, at their core, they're both commercial mortgage-backed securities. They're both securities that are backed by a pool of commercial mortgage loans or similar types of interests. The difference in the nomenclature essentially relates to the different legal structure that they take on, and over the course of the evening, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the nuances and the advantages and disadvantages of the different structures. But in particular, what the structure that's used, and we'll refer to as CLO, is a structure where the issuer is essentially a corporation that's issuing securities, and in particular, those securities are debt securities or notes. And the reason why that's important is the CMBS world, you might be familiar with pass-through certificates. In the context of the CLO, because it's a corporation, it's issuing notes. The notes are going to can be denominated, as you see in the diagram, they can be tranched, just like in the CMBS transaction. But the legal structure is that of debt, and therefore it comes with payment dates, maturity dates, events of default, liquidation. And that can impact the structure, the characteristics of the notes, as well as some of the flexibilities and some of the things that the issuer can or cannot do while it's holding the assets. The deal parties should look familiar to you because they are relatively similar to what you'd see in a CMBS deal with a loan seller, an issuer, trustee, servicer, special servicer, collateral manager. Some deals have that, and that's something that we'll hopefully have a chance to talk about this evening. Advancing agent, placement agent. So in the broader sense, it is similar to a REMIC or a pass-through type of a deal, but because it has a different legal structure, it's on its debt, it brings along a number of different features and nuances that we'll get into.
Thanks. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to encourage everyone to ask questions. If you've got a question, let's make this an interactive panel. We're lucky that we have just a large number of panelists. So if you've got a question, please go ahead. I promise not to talk over. Well, I don't promise, but I'll try not to talk over our panelists when they're going ahead with an answer. The first question is really to start the panel off with, what is a bridge loan? When we're talking about bridge financing versus just, let's say, a CMBS floating rate deal or a conduit deal, Kunal, can you define a little bit of what we're talking about and the types of assets that are going into these transactions?
Sure. I think there's a number of ways you could answer that question. I mean, the way I'm going to choose to answer that is by just throwing out a few numbers. You know, a bridge loan is obviously a transitional loan. There's a transition cash flow story. You look at the spectrum of CRE CLOs that are out there, you will see bridge loans that have as-is cash flow debt yields anywhere from mid-5s to low 8s. That's kind of what you're looking at. And I kind of think of it as shades of gray. So you've got bridge light loans where they're pretty stabilized. You may have a sponsor who's buying a multifamily property, needs some sprucing up, small capital injection, already 93% occupied. They think they can bump rents up 10% over the next 12 months after they put the capital investment in the asset. That's a bridge light loan. Take the other end of that, a 6% or 5.8% debt yield, 50% occupied office building, very well located, but it's an asset that needs to be repositioned. You have a sponsor that comes in with a much more elaborate plan to put in $30 a foot capital in that asset. That's a 24-month, 36-month turnaround, where they're going to get that thing leased up to 85% and bring in a couple of new anchor tenants. That's a much more transitional story. You will see both types of loans in CRE CLOs, and I want to kind of compare that maybe to fixed rate conduit, which a lot of people know, where you're looking at stabilized cash flow assets generally that are anywhere from 8.5% debt yield would be a lower cap rate asset in a better market, all the way up to 10.5%, 11% debt yield, although the averages right now are probably in the mid to high nines is where conduit is. And I think the challenge, or the interesting thing about bridge loans for an issuer and for the banker representing the issuer is the process with the rating agencies, process with the investors. The rating agencies are obviously, they like cash flow. They like cash flow today. And so to get a bridge loan deal, which is predominantly those fixed debt yields rated, you're going to end up with a worse answer, just because obviously the more credible the business plan, the more you can tell and convince the rating agency that this business plan is going to work, and here's why. You get a little bit of upside for that, or some credit. But generally, they're raters of as-is cash flow, and you'll see more conservative structure. And then at the back end, when you're out marketing to investors, it's a similar theme. Your bar is much higher. Burden of proof is much higher. You're trying to sell deep credit stories, and you're asking a lay buyer who doesn't know who you are that, okay, you're going to take risk on this. And obviously that, again, is incumbent on both the issuer and the banker. The more track record the issuer has, history of performance and other things, those are all things that come into play. And that's
So how do these compare with the large note floaters? We see floating rate deals that are being done in CMBS.
Yeah, so
just size or
that's a good question. So JP Morgan is, without question, the leading issuer of pooled floaters in 2.0. There's no other banks that are involved, but we've by far been the most prolific. And I would say the general characteristic of the floaters we're originating is they're much more on the bridge, like I wouldn't even call them bridge loans. The most common question I get from investors on our pooled floaters is, why isn't this fixed? Because those are loans that could be fixed, maybe should be fixed, but the sponsor, for whatever reason, disposition strategy, hold period, chooses to take a floater. They may think LIBOR is staying at zero. They prefer that. And so the floaters we're doing are much more stabilized versus what the big broker-dealers are doing pre-crisis. I wouldn't really compare them that much to what most of the CLO issuers are doing.
So Joan and Gene, from your shop's perspective, when you're looking at these loans, are you seeing any trends, or what kind of loans do you look at? I don't know that the product is necessarily the same between Resource and Arbor, but what are you seeing and what are you looking for?
Yeah.
Can I respond to something that Kunal said?
We have 30 seconds.
I would
It's going to be that JP Morgan is not the leading, the premier.
Definitely not. I would just like to draw a distinction between large loan floaters and CRE CLOs, which is that those of us who issue CRE CLOs are keeping something like 20% of the deal. We are viewing it as a financing and not a trade. And I think that's a huge distinction. Exactly. I'm not going to
That's fair. I was talking more on loan level, but that's fair.
Okay.
And Joe, one other thing on that, the pooled floaters, the first mortgage component of those deals are relatively low leverage and have very attractive debt yields, but generally those entire capital structures of those properties generally have mezzanine or B notes below it. So when you aggregate the entire debt on those loans, in many cases they're more levered.
Last dollar of leverage. Yeah, that's right.
They're more levered than loans that go into CRE CLOs, and I think investors certainly are aware of that. And I also think it's important to highlight that in a CRE CLO, the repayment. So when a borrower pays off the loan, all the proceeds of that loan are used to delever the capital structure in a static transaction sequentially.
Sometimes, some structure.
Static deal.
In a static deal, right.
You see all the cash runs through to the benefit of the most senior outstanding class, and it's paid sequentially. In the pooled floaters, when those loans pay off, there effectively is pro-rata distribution outside of the trust, the mezz or B note class. So it doesn't build the OC or subordination in the same facet as a fully sequential transaction does.
Yeah, I think in fairness, the proceeds, you're just saying there's more dollars of leverage that would be applied if all the leverage is on the mortgage loan versus being a manager.
Right, because it gets paid
mezz holder outside of it.
Understood. But the point would be in the structure, right, that you've got less leverage in the deal than overall.
Right.
But you're right.
Higher loan
Correct.
structure.
You're right.
I would just say that the question I was responding to wasn't so much the structure of the deals, but the profile of the cash flows.
Understood. Understood. We'll get into the structure a little bit more, and I think taking it outside of that is difficult to relate to. So, Joan, back to you and Gene on kind of what these loans look like and the characteristics of the loan. Is there something we're seeing in trends? Are we seeing more construction or land, or what does a transitional loan or a bridge loan look like?
For us, we've always specialized in what we call lightly transitional bridge loans, and we're not changing. As we get more entrants into the business, we do see people that will reach for a lot more risk than we're comfortable using. I think, we have seen it, even in the loans that we like to do, sort of compression spreads. But we're not, again, joining that rate. So I would say those are the changes that we.
You do see a few more market entrants who are looking there. It doesn't affect what you're doing with your product. Maybe that there's a little bit more entrance on the transitional heavy or transitional moderate versus transitional light.
Maybe, we also see, Fannie and Freddie have announced they're going to do more transitional lending, and we do a lot of multifamily. It does even more. So that will probably affect us in the future. It hasn't yet.
Dean, you want to talk a little bit about that maybe? We just trends period.
We do probably 75-80% of our business, probably 80+% today actually, is multifamily. Bridge, bridge to us means a lot of things, but I guess we predominantly do bridge light as well as Kunal defined it. We will do something with more moderate to heavy transitional component as well. We certainly do those deals and like them from time to time, but as a percentage of what we do, it tends to be more of a bridge light program. An average loan is probably outstanding from 18 to 30 months. They're floating rate, they're LIBOR-based 1-month floating rate loans. Spreads are probably from low 400s to mid to high 500s today, something like that. On the average, it's probably high 400s to 500 over LIBOR. That's definitely been a trend that's been down over the last 24 to 36 months, which would surprise no one. I don't think we've seen too much of a compression in spreads over the last 9 months. We've probably seen a bit. There definitely have been new entrants into the market. I think there have been more people who want to enter than actually found it feasible to do so. I think one of the things that we've really seen, I would imagine Joan has seen this as well, is that if you don't have a real platform, there are a lot of borrowers who really are reluctant to borrow money from you. We find a lot of our borrowers are not as sensitive to pricing. They're not trying to get the last 5, 10, 20 basis points out of pricing as they might be on a CMBS execution. They're trying to maximize proceeds and minimize their cost. I think a lot of borrowers on the bridge side, at least that we see, are really interested in certainty of execution and knowing who's going to service the loan, knowing that you won't retrade them on the docks, that you'll close a loan, you have the ability to close it if you issue a term sheet. So we are seeing more competition, but I think if you have a platform that's regarded as sustainable, I think it's a big competitive advantage, and I think a lot of borrowers were really saw the downside of that, from late 2007 through 2008, 2009. So I think that we find them more increasingly focused on that.
Well, let me throw this out to the underwriters then, because that's a really good segue. Both Jeff and I and the underwriters get paid by people doing these deals, people in Joan and Gene's position. So we're chasing deals. How come we haven't seen the rush back to CRE CLOs that I think maybe we expected? One person goes out with a deal, everybody wants to do a deal, and I think we saw from 2005 on a lot of new entrants that Gene was talking about and Joan alluded to in her answer. Darren, why do you think, and Chuck and Kunal, why do you think we haven't seen as many deals happening or deals sitting around a bit more?
Sure. I think there's really two major reasons. One is rating agencies have become very conservative in how they look at pools of bridge loans in a securitization. Moody's in particular is really the major rating agency that is involved in the space, and they are a very strong governor on effective advance rates, investment grade advance rates. Their advance rates are much more conservative than where they were, for instance, in 2006. Today, if you look at Moody's methodology, which is very transparent, the guys at Moody's do a good job. If you look at their methodology and you run a pool of real high quality bridge loans through their methodology, best case investment grade advance rate, best case, is low 70s, 70, 71, maybe 72% investment grade proceeds. Took a time machine back to 2006 with a similar pool of whole loans. The leverage would be 90 to 95% investment grade. Do you have a time machine? I don't. All right. So you're going from 2.5 turns of leverage. I'm sorry, you're going from 9 to 15 turns of leverage to 2 to 2.5 turns of leverage. So that's a huge difference in how these deals get done. So the quality is much different, much better. Certainly, you could argue that Moody's is being too conservative, and certainly, I think everybody agrees the rating agencies are too aggressive during the last cycle. But I think the pendulum certainly has swung a little too far. The other thing to highlight is, then you're comping those advance rates to warehouse lines, and generally, warehouse lenders are somewhere between 70 and 80% advance rate. So, Moody's is in many cases more conservative than, for instance, Wells Fargo on what they're willing to put investment grade proceeds on. So that's certainly a big issue. And then certainly cost of funds and structure is another big issue. Generally, the market over the last 2 years generally has been a static market, with the exception of Gene's deals and a couple that we've done. It's generally been a static market, so not a managed market. And the structures are sequential pay vehicles. And in a static transaction, when the loans pay off, obviously those proceeds are going to be used to deleverage the capital structure sequentially, and you're paying off your cheapest source of financing, and you're also deleveraging quickly. So in order for a static vehicle to make any sense, you have to have call protection. And generally, bridge loans have light call protection. So you need to be able to originate a pool of loans quickly in order to have adequate call protection so that you can come to market quick enough to take advantage of that call protection. Because if you get prepaid without it, you're obviously the issuer's returns would suffer pretty dramatically if they get massive payoffs. That's been a big issue for static deals and aggregating enough collateral that has the call protection. Managed transactions certainly would address the issue of prepayments, but the market really hasn't accepted managed structures in any source of volume. And I think the market generally struggles there with pricing. Those deals just aren't competitive. They can get done, but the pricing and the levels that issuers would have to put on those bonds to sell them are certainly, in many cases, unattractive.
I would say that Gene is showing remarkable restraint at this point. So we'll give him an opportunity. Chuck, UTS offers both warehouse lines, and investment banking.
My brain kind of works in a little bit more of a simplistic kind of fashion. I broke it down into three kind of components when I saw this question come up. And, first I would categorize sort of the first component as sort of lender focus. When the market came back in CMBS land, right, securitization came back as a technology, and, there was a major bank that came out with a paper that said there was going to be this massive wave of CLOs. It might have been 3 years ago or something, and it never happened. Not all lenders
were playing in both spaces, but certainly the lenders that were trying to rebuild sort of a primary basic CMBS operation were more focused on actually building that for the first couple of years and not focused on floating rate transitional. The second bucket in my mind was simply financing alternatives. And so, Gene mentioned, borrowers for light transitional, moderate transitional, heavy transitional, and that those things mean different things to different banks and different specialty finance shops. The borrowers for these complicated loans at times, want to have somebody on the phone that they know and have known and can trust to, call and contact when they need another draw, when they need to, get an approval for a new lease or something like that. And then the lender financing alternatives, the guys that have the access to balance sheets, right? And they have no capacity constraints. They have no mark-to-market or request provisions at times. There's no need to access the capital markets. As capacity goes down and they need to either increase line, caps or otherwise, then maybe that would be an attractive exit. And then the third would be everything that Darren kind of walked through. I 100% agree with, which is agencies and pricing. Agencies that were very slow to come back, and to be fair to Moody's was one of the first to come back to rate these types of vehicles. Others were slower to do that. And then when they did come back, absolutely, they were very conservative. And on the investor side, investors were pushing back against the old structures. They wanted credit pools that were discrete and that could diligence and approve through their committees. And that's slowly evolving. And Gene's been at the forefront of that technology for a few years now. Very successful at getting those types of managed vehicles done, and so hopefully that's the next stage. But that's kind of how I've always broken it down.
Now, I promise you won't be last on all the questions because it puts you in the difficult position.
I think a lot of I agree with a lot of what Darren and Chuck said. I mean, I would kind of break it down pretty simplistically too and say that, coming out of the crisis, the CRE CLO 1.0 model was, viewed by a lot of people as broken. A lot of those deals went bad. There was a lot of liquidations. A lot of bondholders took losses. The agencies were obviously retrenching. Coming out of the crisis, there was a ton of repo financing available to a lot of the guys who are doing these deals right now. Attractive terms, advance rate, financing costs, even mark-to-market, and features that in a benign origination environment or credit environment. So when you think about 2010, 11, and 12, when you're coming out of the Great Recession and you're originating loans into a early recovery, feeling pretty good about your your credit marks and your repo lender. You're like looking at it saying, well, I've got 3 years of term. I'm making loans where my values are really depressed. My values are going to pop because the economy is coming back. Too much brain damage to do a CLO. It's too complicated. And certainly, as Darren pointed out, the delta between what an advance rate from a bank looks like and the cost versus what a CLO in 2011 might have looked like were pretty great. When you fast forward to now, we are in a much later stage of the current cycle. The credit environment is no longer benign. There is still a good amount of repo available, but things have changed. And I think for more established players like Joan and like Gene, they certainly recognize the value of having balanced sources of financing, having a good mixture between bank lines and access to the capital markets, and having that brand.
Another great segue. So even though we didn't set this up, we probably would have. Let me start out to Gene and Joan then a little bit, which sounds like why, other than the fact that you get to work with folks like me and Jeff, why do a CRE CLO and not just have the not use repo financing?
Let Gene go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Gene, go first. Thank you. I always do ladies first. I apologize.
I think it's back to the balance issue that Kunal was talking about. I think the reasons that we do CRE CLO issuance and the reasons that we do bank warehouse borrowings are not one and the same. It's not the same type of borrowing. With the banks, regardless of how the docs are drafted, it's subjective. And, in a benign credit environment with liquidity, it's probably not not an issue for a good originator to find credit. But when the market turns,